Today, I am talking to James Pierce, who is one of the most qualified people in the world to talk about open source. He led the open source initiative at Facebook. He's now maintaining a pretty big open source project called TinyBase, and he packaged up his wisdom into a Taro course, which I'll also leave in the description. What would you recommend as the right mindset for why someone should contribute to open source?
I don't think you should approach open source solely as a resume fluffing activity, right? It's going to be a very slow process to get familiar with the open source culture and, really find a project that you enjoy working on. And so that should be the priority, I think. Find something that you believe in, find something maybe that you already use and you have ideas for how to improve. Find something that you think has a friendly community around it and you really want to get in and help with. And the side effect will be that you are picking up these professional skills and you've got something awesome to put on your resume. But I think, that should be the way around that you do it. What's the saying? If you find something you love, then you'll never work a day in your life or something, right? So if you can find a project that you really like working on, then you'll have the passion and the enthusiasm to work on that, and then it'll look great on your resume, but not the other way around. In terms of finding and identifying what projects are suitable, again, cover it in the course. There's a bunch of ways, there's a bunch of heuristics that you can use to try to pick suitable projects. You might want to pick one that's in a programming language you're already familiar with, so you can get running quickly. A project that you already use that's a dependency or a transitive dependency of something you're already doing is valuable because you're a user of it, so you kind of know what you can do to improve it. But I would say don't limit yourself to that, right? It's also kind of fun to go into some completely new part of the stack that you've never seen before. It's like, oh, there's a Rust project over there. I don't know anything about Rust, but like, wow, this might be a cool way to find out. Just break yourself in gently and learn backend if you're a front end engineer, or learn front end if you're a back end engineer, and get familiar with new languages. And even within a given language or a given part of the stack, by working in different projects, you're going to see different patterns, different opinions, different styles being used, and it just kind of broadens your horizon for what the different types of projects are out there. And when you've seen one, you kind of got like one idea. You see two, you're like, oh, I can see some of the same ideas again, but then there's some different stuff. And you look at three, and you look at four, and eventually like, okay, I got a bigger picture here. I understand what the common denominators are of all these projects. And like I said, you go to a professional environment, you're going to see an amalgam of all of these different styles and approaches and parts of the stack, and you're then going to be well equipped with a good kind of background in what you're looking at.
I wonder if you have commentary about big tech open source versus indie hacker open source, because no matter how much we say it, I think people will still view, hey, I want to go and contribute to React, the project, and that's going to be my ticket into getting a job at Facebook, at Meta. But I also think that comes with trade-offs. I think one of the things you mentioned in the course, which I thought was really insightful, is the long and arduous journey of someone who contributed to Google Chrome, which is a massive, massive project. Yep. I think millions or tens of millions of lines of code. And they documented how long it took because the people at Google are also quite busy. So that's one extreme. The other extreme is someone like you, who's like very passionate. You're dedicating a lot of your time to TinyBase. And I think if someone opens up a issue or a pull request on TinyBase, within a couple of days, you'd probably be all over it and you'd be super friendly, right? So how would you recommend people to think about, let me contribute to this big Airbnb Meta open source project or to an indie developer?
Yeah. Well, so that's a really good question. It's very tempting to say, oh, I'll just go and land some killer PRs on React and then I'm going to get hired by Facebook. It's like, well, it's going to take a long time to get those adopted. It's going to take you a long time to build up the trust with the maintainers even to have your work looked at. So yeah, that's a longer game, but that does work. And certainly when React was younger, quite a few of the folks that were recruited or that we were talking to about joining Facebook were people that were active in that community. But no, as the project gets larger, probably thousands of people contributing to React now, and arguably it's tough to stand out, let alone get in front of maintainers. But at the other extreme, some kind of indie thing that no one's ever heard of, yeah, you're going to pick up some skills, you're going to learn, you're going to get some scores on the board, but you're not necessarily going to be bumping into other people in the community who maybe know about the opportunities at a big tech company. Like at least if you're, working on an Airbnb project and you start to build a reputation on that project, then there's going to be someone maybe who's like, oh yeah, we're really looking for a hire in this team and maybe this person might be a good fit. You know what I mean? You're opening those doors where in an indie project you won't. But there is, there are some nice kind of hybrids and some kind of compromises here. One idea might be you work on something inside the React ecosystem that's not actually React itself. So React has obviously got a whole bunch of plugins, extensions, frameworks, and everything else that's built that's built up around it. And you could go and work on something like, I don't know, Remix or React Router or like many of the other React projects that exist. So you're pretty close to the core React code base. You can still build up a reputation, but you might find that there's a little bit of a faster metabolism than something that is directly maintained by a large company. And by the way, these larger projects that are run by, let's say, Facebook, there's a key characteristic about these that people often forget, which is that these are being run in production at Facebook. So if you go to facebook.com and view source, you will literally see the same React that you would if you went to the head of React on GitHub. And so those maintainers are not just shipping anything, right? Because they could easily accidentally ship something that brings down facebook.com, and that's going to be bad for everybody. So you will find that there's a lot more rigor, and these processes take a little bit longer, but it's for its very good reason. Whereas something like, I don't know, React Query or React Router, I don't think those are used by Facebook. They're still very popular projects, but you might find that you can get stuff landed there because it's not kind of a mission critical thing for the big tech company itself.
It reminds me of the advice that I've heard of. If you want to really like contact a celebrity or some big deal person, probably the best thing to do is not contact them directly, but contact their assistant or their chief of staff or a friend of theirs. And that's like your route to be able to get into that main person. That sounds like the same thing as what you're recommending. Maybe React might be really difficult to contribute to, but the ecosystem around React might be an easier entry point.
Right. And of course, you don't have to be writing code to be a contributor to the ecosystem. That's the other thing, right? The code might take a little longer to land, but you could write a tutorial or an article or a video or do a podcast about the new features in React, and you're going to be getting your name out there. You're going to be, giving that aura of expertise. You're going to be building up your name, and that's also a good way to get seen and have things that you can point to in your resume. You haven't actually touched the code, but you've shown that you're kind of in it, so to speak. And no doubt there are going to be maintainers at the core tech company who are also seeing that work and begin to recognize your name, and that will help. So don't limit yourself just to having to land complicated pull requests to get that killer job, or at least to get the killer opportunities.
Okay, James, thank you so much for sharing. So I'll leave a link for Tinybase, your GitHub profile, in the description, along with this really well-packaged guide, this course that you've made about becoming an open source master. I think it's really one of the best resources on the internet if you are interested in contributing to open source. Where else can I point people to learn more about you, or if they want to learn more about open source?
Yeah, so they may be getting a little out of date now, but there are a couple of videos that I did at a conference called OzCon, which is the open source conference, where I explicitly talked about how Facebook thought about its open source program at the time, all these benefits, all the metrics that we use for tracking things. And so if you are already at an open source company and maybe you're part of the open source program, then go check those out. I think a lot of the lessons we learned there are still very relevant. There is also an industry group, which is called the To-Do group, TODO, and that is a consortium of open source programs at large companies. So a couple of ways that that's useful. One, if you are working at a large company and it has a program, then that's a great group to join. There are lots of best practices, lots of communities and forums and so forth there. But if you are an individual and you're thinking, well, which large companies do have open source programs that I might join, go and look at some of the logos on the To-Do group website. And, those are going to be some of the usual suspects in terms of companies that really take open source seriously. But otherwise, go to GitHub, start trawling through repositories, find cool stuff, go out and build things, people.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.
Always a privilege. Great to see you again.